So you see this bomb, you almost step on it, and then a switch goes off, and you decide to change your focus.
Yeah, so I had been interested in transhumanism from the time I was in college. We were given an essay on cryonics, the field where you actually put dead people into some type of freezing compound, and then in hopes in 20, 30 years you'll be able to have the science to regenerate them and reanimate them. And our English class was asked to write an essay on it and then debate it. And so it was the very first time I was introduced to it at about age 20. And I started reading about transhumanism and sort of fell in love with this concept of using science and technology to become superhumans. We don't need to worry about death. We don't need to worry about disease. We don't need to worry about, the kind of things that plague our biological beings. We can use science and technology to overcome it all. So I spent, a lot of the next 10 years as I was sailing, just kind of reading about it, being into it without doing anything about it. But then after this incident, I came back and began working on the Transhumanist Wager, which is a novel about transhumanism. It's kind of an epic. And it took me many years to write the book because it's a pretty long, complex philosophical novel. It's at least 30% of the book is pure philosophy. So while it's a novel, it's not a novel in the sense of you just read it in storyline. It's actually huge amounts of just pure academic philosophy going through it. And the book did really well. And, I've been talking ever since about it. And it's gotten me in a lot of trouble because it's pretty controversial.
In what way?
Well, essentially the main character, Jethro Knights, he says he will do anything to live indefinitely. And so naturally the book goes out of its way to create an environment where he can't do what he wants. He's fighting against religious entities in America that are saying we don't like transhumanism. We don't want it as part of anywhere in America. So they sort of outlaw it. And so he kind of becomes a sort of a terrorist for his own ideas. But the problem is he'll take it to all these extremes. And in the end, he forms his own nation called Transhumania, a floating seasteading platform. And I'm a volunteer ambassador at the Seasteading Institute. I know you've done something with that.
We had Joe Quirk on.
Yeah. And so I kind of did a big, about a third of the book discusses seasteading, where 10,000 of some of the smartest scientists in the world work on creating the ability to live indefinitely. But then the world says, no, this is not right. And they say, we're going to take over your country. And Jethro says, no, we're going to start a world war. And we have the technology to do that. And he ends up defeating the planet and making it into a transhumanist-minded planet.
What kind of crazy fucking thoughts are going on in your head, sir?
So he uses authoritarian ideas. And this has been the controversy of the book, is that a lot of the transhumanists, especially the older ones, said, hey, we like it that you're writing about transhumanism, but we don't like that you're taking to such extremes. But Jethro is a militant leader. He wants his ideas to spread, and they want to keep taking away from them. They also, in the book, kill his wife and do all sorts of other things.
Whoa.
So it's a novel where it's an epic from kind of his early childhood to the end, or near the end of his life, where he transforms the world against everyone's will. And what makes the book controversial is that nobody likes Jethro. He's sort of this incredibly arrogant, machine-like human being, yet he's the good guy of the book. And yet you sort of cheer for him because, even though he's sort of authoritarian, you would like him because he's driven. He's like the greatest fighter you've ever met, don't tell me about rules I'm just the best fighter, And on one hand, that's very admirable. On the other hand, we have rules for a reason, but Jethro breaks them to get what he wants. And he made the Transhumanist Wager where he really he says, I'll do anything to achieve it. And that's where the controversy comes in, because clearly if we all did anything we wanted, we'd be in a pretty hectic place, both politically, government, with society, all these different things. And so the book has won a lot of praise and just as much criticism. And if you look at the Amazon reviews, it's like an E. There's like a huge amount of 1 stars and a huge amount of 5 stars, but not much in the middle. And nobody said, everyone hates the book because they call it, they say, well, this is an evil character. And the people that like it say, no, this is a character who actually wants to fight for what he believes in. And, revolutionary leaders are sort of like that. They They take us to different places, and they use different methods that certainly are questionable. But again, it's a fictional novel, and you can take it for what the art is worth.
Well, this is where it gets complicated, because you are planning on actually running for president on a transhumanism platform. Now, when you've written a book about a world war that gets started by a good guy with a transhumanism agenda, and now you're wanting to run for president, people go, this Zoltan guy, this motherfucker... Think about his name. His name is Zoltan, and he wants to run the planet, and he wants to be a transhumanism. He wants to be a robot. You're turning into a robot that's going to start a world war to run the planet.
Yeah, so
that's obviously not true, but
no, and of course that is the most difficult question I'm going to be asked probably a lot as I move forward with the whole.
You're really going to do this?
Yeah. No, I mean it's already said. I've sort of staked my entire reputation on it at this point. We have some big publicity events,
but do you think that you could possibly win?
So I don't think I could win this time around. I think there's virtually no chance. I think if you look at how far the Transhumanist Party might do by 2020, 2024, where I would potentially do it again, I think we might have a much better chance of making a dent. Now, I don't want to be unrealistic and say that we could actually win, or that I could win the presidency or anything like that. But I am definitely advocating for a run that's taking all my time. Like I'm literally dedicating now, all my waking hours towards this party.
Really?
All the infrastructure it's really complicated. And I basically am working with advisors. I'm working on the different, there's so many logistical things that one has to do, including just dealing with taxes for an entity like this, and registration process, a manifesto. But in the next week or two, most of the infrastructure will be in place. We already have a lot of it in. We have a number of officers now, and we're going for it. I mean, I'm going to stake everything I have on it. My wife has given the approval, which is important because I got 2 kids, and in her, and we're going to do a lot of campaigning. We're going to we have some great events. In fact, I'll probably hopefully be down in a few weeks to LA to start a documentary on it, which has a great budget, by the way. And so I think there'll be a lot of things coming out about the Transhumanist Party that are going to work really in the favor of getting people to think about what would it mean to have a political, person running who actually wants to use technology and science to change politics. Not just, politics, let's dabble a little bit in science politics, but I actually want to use technology and science to dominate politics. I think we can solve most of humanity's problems and run a much better country if we put politics, medicine, and technology sort of at the forefront of the government. Currently, we're at the forefront is a lot of other issues that defense and, taxes and all that stuff is very important, of course. But I'm an idealist, and I would like to make it so that everyone can live longer. Everyone has the choice to potentially not die. I'm pretty convinced that if we put $1 trillion towards conquering death, we would probably achieve it. Most experts actually feel that way too, that the amount of money that's actually going into life extension science right now is so small, literally hundreds of millions. But if we actually could quadruple it, or maybe make it 20 times that, we could take the 20, 30-year window and make it into 10 years. And that's one of the platforms, is that we're going to, of the parties to say, well, we're going to take money from our wars, our far-off wars, and put it directly towards important things, education, science and technology, and also life extension science. So, but to answer your somewhat dangerous question for me publicly, I am distancing myself from the book because it was a moment of writing something very artistic and trying to write something very philosophical. But the philosophy of Jethro Knights does not work in a political campaign. And I'm doing my best to disassociate myself from his ways, even though I'm the creator of the philosophy. And I'm, the one who sort of spent all these years developing it, but it would never work. It would never work in America as we are today. We live in a country that's very free. There aren't a bunch of religious people trying to stamp out transhumanism. In the book, he lives in a war environment. That's part of why he fights back with war. So luckily, we live in a pretty awesome country. You can mostly do what you want. And I'd like to convince people to do a lot more than just building bombs and some of the crazy things that they do, and spend it towards science and technology, and hoping that everyone will eventually like it everyone will eventually live better. Everyone will eventually kind of be taken to a new era where, their families and their loved ones don't have to die. We have all the benefits of technology, like we don't have traffic in LA, like I told you. I mean, these are kind of things, driverless cars that are going to improve everything. And I think if more people embrace technology, we might go a lot further as a species and also as a country.
The obvious question, when you say if people live forever or people could get to a point where they don't die, we can conquer death. We have too many people. There's 7 billion people on the planet, right? Is that what the number is now?
Yeah, I think it's going up fast.
Yeah, it's going up fast. Los Angeles, as you said, we were talking on the way about you traveling on the way over here, how difficult it was to get here because the traffic is so bad. There's 20 plus million people in Los Angeles. What happens if they keep having babies and no one dies?
Yeah, so, this is one of the most challenging questions and most challenging ideas about the problem with transhumanism right now is when we advocate for technology and science to change people's lives and make them live longer and better, the first question everyone says, well, hey, man, we got environmental problems in the world. And I agree, we do. I'm a believer in some of the climate change problems. I'm a believer in, overpopulation. I'm not going to in any way try to deny some of these things. I actually think the science stands pretty strongly for it. The question, though, is whether tackling that broadly, tackling environmental problems with the kind of ideas that we're trying to do right now, less population, recycling, and stuff like, just the basic things. We're trying to empower ourselves to be a more green world. I'm not 100% sure that is the accurate, or that is the very best path we can take. Now this gets kind of speculative, and I don't actually endorse this necessarily as a kind of a political platform, but I'm pretty convinced that within 25 to 50 years, people will start downloading their consciousness into machines and stuff like that. So there's this idea that maybe we'll start using a lot less resources 100 years from now, because people will live in digital lives and virtual lives. Maybe we'll all live. Maybe the entire population will fit into that Empire State Building that is full of servers, as we had discussed. And maybe the Earth will have a chance to grow back or come back to what, its form. But that's not the, that's just one of the kind of speculative ideas that transhumanists might use to counter some of the criticism that we get about environmental problems. What I'm for is for a lot of the green technology. That's the stuff I want to see. I want to see solar power increase. I want to see money going towards that. I want to see money going towards the windmills. I want to see money going towards the green types of technologies that not only can make a whole new generation of wealthy people and give millions of jobs to people, but it can also at the same time help the planet. So, I take this twofold approach. One is very speculative. In the future, there'll be space exploration and all these other things. We might figure out ways that don't make us so dependent on the planet. But the more important way is that we're going to spend money on the type of technologies that really make the planet better. Get people to move into cities, make them greener, leave open spaces alone. And I'm a big animal advocate as well. I've worked with wildlife. A lot of my National Geographic work was with wildlife. So I'd love to see the species replenished. I'd love to see it so that we can actually go to national parks and have the kinds of things that we all hope for, where you see deer and you could take your children out there, and especially in Africa where there's so much poaching and stuff like that. Of course, in America we do a pretty good job with protecting our wildlife. But I'd like to see us be more of a leader on the international front, saying we actually need to stop it. It's crazy that the tiger population is literally on the edge of extinction, literally gone.
There are more tigers in Texas than there are in the wild. Isn't that incredible?
It's sad. It's terrible because they're an important part of the ecosystem in all the places they're at. And one of the stories we covered was the Siamese crocodile when I was in Cambodia. And there's a couple in captivity, but basically the last time someone saw one was like 13 years ago in the wild. And so it's gone, it's essentially gone. And when you think about it, you're like, well, that's a certain species just basically gone. And why is it gone? Well, people were making boots and stuff out of its tails and whatnot. So I would like to advocate for policies that kind of make that happen less and generally increase our environmental consciousness with money, instead of building bombs, hey, let's spend it on building electric cars, or let's spend it on other ideas, even more unique ideas than that.